If you're participating in this online course, you're probably preparing to apply for DC-based internships and careers. There's a lot of great internet-based advice for resumes already. So the reason we're including this video is one thing that I don't like about a lot of resume advice is that it's very prescriptive and tells you what to do. I believe that resumes are a blank slate. It's a blank Word document, blank white rectangle where you can present the information that you think will make someone most interested in you in the order and manner that's most relevant and appropriate to your experience. That being said, a lot of people are tempted to download a resume template and fill in the information. A resume is not a job application where you are answering the questions being asked of you. There are a lot of decisions you have to make about what order things go in and how you decide what to include and how. I personally recommend not starting with a template whatsoever, but starting with a blank Word document and typing what you want to say about yourself and the information that you would like to present. If you would like to use a template for ideas of how things should be laid out, that's fine. If you are very much more comfortable using a template, make sure it is one that is not limiting about the edits you can make. There have been many times when I've been working with students who want to change how a date shows up, for example, and because of the template, and there are many word boxes, and it's very difficult to navigate and maneuver, the template can be very limiting. I also believe there are no rules to resumes whatsoever. A lot of people will tell you a resume has to be one page or that it cannot include any color, just for example, two things that I've heard. There are a lot of people who will read your resume who do believe that a resume should only be one page or have no color, but there are other people who will read your resume who will disagree. So ultimately, you have to try to infer what the person receiving your resume might think based on what industry they're in, how traditional or how startup-y the company is, etc. But ultimately make the resume you think the way that it looks best, because the same resume will look different to different people. Let's go ahead and address that elephant in the room of whether a resume must be one page. The reason people say that is because people might not read past the first page of your resume. So you do not want anything that's vitally important for someone to see after the first page. Typically speaking, if you're listening to this as somebody who is about to graduate from FIU with an undergraduate degree and has an average amount of work experience for a recent bachelor's graduate, your stuff very well might fit on one page. But some people have enough work experience and other relevant information that can go on 2 pages. And as long as you're strategic about prioritizing the most relevant information, I think it's fine. Actually, some industries, like the federal government, for example, do prefer more detail versus summary information. All right. So, what are some other questions that you might have that you're hoping to get an answer for, but I'm not going to give you an answer for because it's really your choice? So, resumes often start with an objective statement or a summary statement. Should you have one? That's up to you. A resume should have important keywords on it that either correspond with that specific job description or that express that you have a specific interest in that job, that career field, that topical interest area, for example. So I think an objective or a summary is a great way to include those words if they don't already exist in your resume or high enough up on your resume. So let's say you want to have an internship that deals with Latin America policy, but unfortunately you haven't had a chance yet to take a class on or have a job in or join a club related to Latin America. You could have a summary statement or objective that says that you're passionate about Latin America or seeking experience with Latin America policy, for example. However, if you already have previous experience in Latin America policy on your resume, you might not need that. It might not hurt either, but if you're looking to save space and somebody's going to read your job descriptions and see that you've already worked in Latin America policy, it becomes almost redundant to put that separately in a less specific section at the top. So that's your decision. This is the same thing for um, courses. Should you put courses that you've taken? Generally speaking, no, but if you want certain words in the courses you've taken to show up when you don't have anything else on your resume where those words would show up, then that's a good way to signal some interest in a specific area. So objective or summary, really up to you. Um, if you really want to highlight a certain thing as well, like that you're good at partnerships or something, and you want that to stand out first, you can use an objective or summary for that. Generally speaking, I think the bullet points of your actual experiences should do most of the talking. Also, what section should you have and what order should they be in? So, for example, you might be here hoping to find out whether you should put your education before your work experience or your work experience before your education. Again, that depends. This might depend on the type of employer you're applying to. So, for example, if you know an employer that you're applying to has been in the news for saying that they no longer require college degrees or that they prioritize experience over degrees, then that might be an indicator that it's a good idea to put your work experience first. However, if the job you're applying to says a bachelor's degree is absolutely positively required, for example, then you might as well put that first and knock it out. They open the resume, know that you have that, and keep moving forward. There are a variety of skills that you can include. So virtually all resumes do include resume and work experience. Some people have skills. Some people have volunteering. Some people have awards. What's mandatory? Nothing really is mandatory. What's important is that you're including information that's relevant. Everything that's relevant and nothing that is not relevant. So don't have a skills section that just has a bunch of the soft skills that came with your template just because it's there and you feel like you should be filling it in. Have a skill section because you have specific demonstratable and or technical skills that are relevant to that job or internship so that when somebody reads those skills, they know that those are things that would make you very successful in that job. While soft skills are common on resumes, such as being a good communicator or well organized, I would prioritize hard and or technical skills like specific software or specific certifications that might set you apart from other people who will have the same soft skills on their resume. Ultimately speaking, I think soft skills are better to demonstrate in the descriptions of your bullet points for your jobs, where you can give an example of being well organized, as opposed to simply putting a bullet point that says you're well organized. Another important question, if you're someone who's doing internships, is whether internships or jobs go in the same section, or do you have an internship section and a job section? This leads me into the underlined most important thing. What's key here is that the most important and relevant information appears higher up on your resume. So, an internship is a job. Therefore, it'd be perfectly appropriate to have one work experience section where your internships and your jobs are listed together. But here's where we could be creative. Within one section of your resume, things should be in chronological order with the most recent work experience first. What if your very relevant internship to what you're applying to now was 2 jobs ago, and maybe some service industry type jobs are more recent? Service industry jobs, by the way, are relevant. When I say that no irrelevant information should be included, service industry jobs, whether it's retail, food service, etc., do have customer service interactions, do have money handling, do have a variety of things that are transferable. So they should be included, especially if you worked in them long enough. But you still might want your kind of policy type internship to be the first thing that somebody sees if it's more relevant. In that situation, you could choose to have a separate internship section and to put it first before your work experience so that you're controlling what people see first. If you will allow me to indulge myself by using a old version of my own resume as an example for the next few slides, let's talk a little bit about the design. First point, make your name stand out a little bit. I see a lot of resumes where the name is as small as all the other text on the document, and I think it's better to make it a little noticeable, make it a little bigger. My number one design tip that I can give is to make it easy to visually distinguish separate elements. Now, by that, what I mean is you can see here from my former job with FIU's Office of Global Learning, the main elements of a entry on your work experience is the place you worked, the title that you had, the city that the job was in, which a lot of resumes have. Not every single resume has that. You don't have to do that. And the dates you were there. When I read a resume, I like for my eyes to be able to tell without really thinking which line is the employer, which line is the title, which line is the city, and which line is the dates. Now, it seems like it's easy to tell that apart, but sometimes I see resumes where all of that is on one line. It's just, FIU Program Manager, November 2017. There's really no spacing between them. The fonts are not different. They might be all bold or nothing bold. And so you have to scan that line and kind of figure out, here's where the title ends, here's where the employer ends. The way I have it laid out here in this image, which by the way is not a template, this is an example of how you can just open a Word document and start typing and end up with a resume. I have the employer name on the left in bold. I have the title in italics underneath. I have the city on the right in bold, and I have the dates in the right in italics. You don't have to do the same thing. Other stuff can be bold, other stuff can be italic. The point here is they're separated onto left and right, and they are formatted differently, so your eye is easily drawn to what is what. How much color or other formatting you use may vary by industry. So if you are a creative type of person applying to a graphic design type job, it could be a good idea to implement colors and other design elements to highlight your creative skills. If you're not sure what the preference in the industry or company you're applying to would be, it's a good idea to err on the conservative side and keep things black and white, standard fonts. If you're going to have a subtle color like a dark red or dark blue on your name or contact information, that's usually fine. But it's really not about the fanciness of the design. The purpose of designing your resume should make it easy for readers to know where they want to look for the information they want about you. And this is especially true in the Washington, D.C. context. There are certainly more progressive in kind of work style and attitudes organizations here that might enjoy some more color. Typically speaking, DC is a conservative town where everything from your resume style to your dress at work is going to be a little more toned down than in Miami. So keep that in mind. While we're on this screenshot, let's talk about the education section. Because regardless if you put your education section at the top or at the bottom or anywhere else, there are a lot of common mistakes that I see in the education section. And the most interesting one, because it is kind of a complicated thing, believe it or not, is what your degree is called. Now, let's say you're getting your bachelor's degree. The proper way to fully type out a bachelor's degree is a Bachelor of, and then usually it's a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science in your major. So for example, I did a criminal justice was my major at FIU as an undergraduate, and you can see in my resume that it's listed as Bachelor of Science in criminal justice. It is not a bachelor's, plural of science. You use an apostrophe S if you're saying bachelor's degree, but if you're listing the entire name of the degree, it is a Bachelor of Science or criminal justice. It's not always a Bachelor of Science, though. That's not a catch-all. Some degrees, like international relations at FIU, are a Bachelor of Arts. Sometimes it's a Bachelor of Business Administration. There's no way to know this without just simply knowing what degree you're in. So if you have a specific major at FIU and you're not sure, it would be best to go to the website of your program to see if it lists the full name of the degree, or otherwise consult a course catalog or something where you can find this information to list it correctly. It is okay to list BA or BS or another abbreviation. I personally think it looks fancy and looks nice to write out the whole word. That's what I chose to do here. A lot of people list the date ranges for their schools like you would for a job. This is not the end of the world, but typically speaking, an education section should act as a list of degrees and when you've earned them. So you do not have to put that you were there from December 2010 to December 2012. You can simply list the month and year that you earned that degree or that you anticipate to earn that degree. So if you transferred from a school, such as Miami-Dade College, with your Associate of Arts degree, or from another four-year university before earning any degree, should you list that? I don't think you have to, because A, this is a list of degrees, so if you didn't earn a degree from somewhere, that wouldn't be on there. And even if you got your Associate of Arts degree, you are now at the four-year institution earning your bachelor's degree. And if what you want people to know is that you are earning the bachelor's degree, then you can simply list that. If the job set, but you're absolutely welcome to include those things as well. If the job requires an associate's degree and you want to mention that you have it, that's great. If your experience at Miami-Dade College or any other university from another area or state you feel is significant to you because it's a great school, because it's you want to show your tie to that area, and you list it in an appropriate way that makes it clear what you did there and when, that's totally fine. But again, I just don't feel like you feel compelled to spend lines of information on stuff that you don't really care to share just because you feel it's required to be there. GPA on your resume. I typically advise against it. I feel that there is always going to be someone who has a higher GPA than you, unless you have a 4.0. And since it's not a required element, if you don't list it, they don't know what it is. They don't know that it's less than somebody else that they have. So if your GPA is very good, if it is a 4.0, for example, or something very close to that, and you would like to choose to put it, you're more than welcome to. It is very common advice that once you are in your freshman year of college, and especially once you're done with your freshman year of college, that you should no longer list anything on your resume relevant to high school. So you don't need to list what high school you went to. Even volunteering and club involvement from high school should be falling off of your resume around the time you finish your freshman year in college, and that should be the motivation to start getting some good experience in college. The bullet points on the work experience that you have are perhaps the most important part of your resume. That's where people are going to know what you've actually done, the skills you have, and what you've accomplished. Think of these not as responsibilities. These are not the job description for that job. These are the things you accomplished in that job. But they should, of course, also creatively convey what responsibilities you've had in that job. The most important thing is to be specific. Now, disclaimer, the bullet points that I have on this sample here are much longer than average, and by no means am I suggesting that your bullet points should be this long. A bullet point can be 1 to 2 lines in length, but this is a good example of how you are choosing how to do your resume. When I was crafting the bullet points for this particular position, there were certain things I wanted to convey with a great deal of specificity about exactly what type of organizations I was working with, exactly what types of software I was using, exactly what amount of budgets I was managing, and not only all of that information, but the context of why I was working with these organizations, what the budget was being spent on, and what I was using the software for. So whether your bullet points are my length or much shorter, you should be endeavoring for a level of specificity of that general nature. Versus descriptors like self-starter or good communicator, it's always better to show rather than tell, and you can demonstrate being a self-starting, well-organized communicator by describing the type of accomplishments that you had in that job. If it's not already clear from this slide, also make sure to start every bullet point with a action verb. I have cultivates, manages, and ideates. I recommend switching those to past tense verbs when you're no longer in that job, and not reusing the same word twice in one bullet point. So you can have manages in this job and an older job, but I would avoid having manages all within one job. Now, it's important to note the general tips that I've given for resumes here are exactly that. They're general. If you're applying for federal government employment or any specific types of industries, then it's always good to get specific resume advice. Federal resumes, and there is an official federal resume guide that we can provide the link to. Include information that would not be typically found on a standard resume, including salary, hours worked per week, and the contact information of your supervisors. A lot of the other tips about being specific and whatnot are still very applicable to federal resumes. While I encourage you to read the official resume guide for federal resumes, it's important to note that federal resumes are required while applying directly to most federal agencies, but do not need to be used for congressional staff roles or some third-party fellowship programs, like where you're applying to a nonprofit organization that might be offering a fellowship role within the federal government. You should defer to those specific rules about what resumes are looking for. And outside of the federal government as well, seek industry-specific guidance as needed. So let's say you are a journalism student. Let's say that you have a lot of clips with freelance projects where you published one article with someone. How do you handle that on a resume? That's a good example of something that you should get kind of journalism industry specific advice on. While we're on the topic of things that are not included in a standard resume, things like salary would not normally be on a resume outside of the federal government. Some other things that are not uh, appropriate on most resumes in the United States are things like photos, marital status, citizenship, etc. Um, a job that requires citizenship might ask you to put that or not, but by default, things like photos, marital status, and citizenship would not be on your resume. I hope this was a helpful starting point. By no means does this end your resume writing journey. Was hoping to instill the principle that your resume is yours. You have more responsibility and control over it than you may have previously thought. And we look forward to supporting you in this writing and editing process.